Greetings and welcome back to 50 Shades of Beige. Well, as you can see here, we have a slight change of atmosphere. That's because today we're having a look at probably the most chungus workstation that I've seen from Dell in a long time. When I say this thing is huge, it is massive. This was originally purchased as a CAD workstation. We're going to take a look at it and see what the options are to upgrade it and see if we can get it working well again. There's a couple of small issues with it. Before we get started, I wanted to do some benchmarking and stuff like that and do a quick tour of the inside so we can see what we're working with. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So far, it looks like this workstation will not disappoint. Really interesting design here from Dell. This is my first time really tearing apart a precision workstation of this quality. Looks like we've got some huge Delta fans here, some cowls. I guess these are to cool the RAM. We've got an NVIDIA M4000 GPU, only one CPU, but an option for dual CPU. So there's some very tasty options here for upgrades. Looks like we've got a standard PCI slot and some PCI Express stuff. So this is probably a little bit older. I'm not sure exactly when the M4000 hails from. I'm pretty sure somewhere around the Maxwell 2 era, so maybe 2015, 2016, something like that. Now, I normally don't show the backside of these machines, but Dell has some really interesting stuff going on here, so let's go ahead and have a look. So if we have a look at the mess of wires back here, you can see Dell basically made a breakout board for the 1300 watt power supply. And I think this is really interesting and really cool, actually. It's a great way to do cable management. And we've seen similar stuff from Seasonic and other companies in the past. I just think it's funny that Dell's been doing it for a long time. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pull this extra SATA power and SATA data cable out. And we're going to go ahead and put our test SSD in. Also take note, the way that they have the fans mounted in the back here is really cool as well. I'm kind of surprised that Dell has this much cooling. Definitely a contrast between, your average Dell Optiplex and a precision workstation. I'm sure they charge accordingly. And we're going to go ahead and just slide this in right back here. I don't really have a good place for it. There we go. Perfect. Good enough for the girls we date. Also, just a quick item of note here. Today we're using the ADATA SU800 SSD. This was one of the top-of-the-line SSDs from about 8 years ago. This one happens to be basically brand new, and I think it'll fit our system well. And of course, it just wouldn't be 50 Shades of Beige if we didn't start off with some 3D Mark. We're going to go ahead and go straight to the Firestrike combined test here. Let's go ahead and see how we do. And kicking things off, it does not look good, guys. 12 FPS just to start things off. I can see our Quadro M4000 is pretty much maxed out at the moment, and the E5-2637 V3 is just kind of hanging in around 40%. And you can definitely tell the GPUs are a bottleneck. Let's go ahead and see our final result. 5899, and there was some kind of issue with the drivers because it couldn't compare me to any other system. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do for upgrades. Now, since my pal here is going to be using this machine mostly for CAD work and some light gaming, I figured it would probably be best to get rid of that really slow quad-core Xeon. It really just doesn't do him any good here. So instead, I did a little bit of looking around and I found this Xeon 1660 V3. 3.0 GHz, 6 cores, 12 threads. This will be a nice upgrade for gaming and is definitely a more capable CPU. Now, I thought about putting a second CPU here, but I just don't see how that's going to benefit our user for gaming. And I don't have another one of these Dell proprietary coolers and all this stuff to go with it. So we're going to just stick with this single CPU. Now, obviously the Quadro A4000 is a huge bottleneck in this situation. So instead I opted to replace it with this MSI Radeon RX 570 4GB. This is the same GPU that came out of the trash bin iBuyPower PC, and especially since this job is basically free, we'll go ahead and pay it forward. Now, we got the iBuyPower PC running last Thanksgiving. If you're interested in that project, be sure to check the link in the description. And with that, it's time to start tearing stuff down. All right, let's have a quick look at our cooler here. This is actually a pretty cool design from Dell. I've certainly seen worse. Obviously, we're gonna need some new thermal paste and some other things, so let's go ahead and grab that. And I also need to grab some IPA to clear off the bottom of this cooler. What a mess. And just like that, we are ready to roll. Now, today's thermal paste of choice is gonna be the Arctic MX4, a classic on the channel here. And we'll go ahead and tighten down that cooler again real quick. Now that we have a more powerful CPU, I decided to add a fan here to the cooler. This cooler has plenty of surface area. I just want to add a little bit more airflow. So I decided to tack this fan onto the end. I was originally going to put it over the top of the VRM like this. But unfortunately, now that I realize that the VRM is there, it's going to block off airflow, and I don't want to do that. So we'll put it on this side. And I just need to find a good way to fasten it. And of course, since we are gaming, we have to have some kind of RGB. So I grabbed this RGB light bar I've had for quite some time, actually. I haven't found a case that it really fit in properly, but it fits perfectly in our Dell case here. And then I just needed to grab some sort of RGB controller. We're gonna go ahead and go with one of these little one hung low controllers that you can find on AliExpress for like $5. It just runs off the SATA adapter, no big deal. 3 pins and you're good to go. Now I know what you're thinking. What is he going to use to hold that fan on there? Well, today I've got a box of waxed twine. And I can hear the grumbling already, but actually waxed twine is commonly used in the telecom and aviation industry to tie down wires in situations where like a zip tie or another plastic hold down isn't suitable. It's cheaper, more environmentally friendly, and costs less than traditional cable ties. But most importantly, it's our only option given the tools at hand, and my commitment to jinkery knows no bounds. I think it looks pretty good given the circumstances. Now, the final piece of our upgrade is actually going to be the storage. We're going to go with a Team Group MP34 SSD. It is 1 terabyte, and it does have a DRAM cache. It's a little bit older, but I think it'll still do great for this system. Now you see me installing it on this PCIe riser card here. That's because our system doesn't natively come with an NVMe slot, but that'll be just fine. It's still just as fast. And next in line is our RX 570. I went ahead and repasted it here, added some new thermal pads to it. We'll go ahead and pop it in the PCIe slot. And it's going to fit in quite nicely. Luckily, we don't have a back plate or anything like that to worry about. But unfortunately, it looks like I am going to need some sort of a GPU support because this thing already looks like it's sagging. And one really nice thing about this Precision Workstation is it comes with the PCIe 8-pin auxiliary power connector right out of the box. No modifications or adapters needed. So a couple of things. We were going to use this RGB controller, but it actually doesn't work, so I'm going to pull that out. I was going to swap these fans out, but then I learned that they're actually really nice Delta fans. It would just be silly for me to pull them out, especially given the amount of work it takes to pull that the fan supports and all that stuff, and the fact that Dell uses proprietary fan connectors. If you look under here, you'll see this USB cable dangling down. That's because our Razer fan controller requires a USB cable for some reason, even though it also gets power from SATA. And the reason we have a Razer fan controller is because I needed to put a new fan here. Now this is the only 80 mil fan that I had, but I felt like it was important because we're upgrading the CPU. And let's face it, come on guys, is it really a gaming PC if there's no RGB? So there you go. That's the minimum requirements for RGB. Got a little bit more cable management to do around here, but that's gonna about wrap it up. Well, let's go ahead and fire up the Firestrike combined test again and see what kind of performance we get now with our new 1660 V3 and RX 580. And already a better result, but I'm still a little disappointed. I thought we'd do better than 20 FPS. Unfortunately, the RX 580 is just gonna max out and do what it can do. Well, let's have a look at our full run here. It looks like we actually did pretty well. 12,290 was our final score versus 5899 previously. So we had huge increases there. Unfortunately, for some reason, 3D Mark thinks the result is not valid. It doesn't like whatever driver Dell is loading on this machine. Either way, I'm still pretty happy with the increase in performance here. And I went ahead and tested out a few other games as well. In Dirt 3, we had some really good results here, getting about 100 to 130 FPS just driving on the test track. That's up from between 66 to 93 on the old graphics card, on the old system there. So I'm pretty happy with the results there. And in Project Teardown, we saw what was a slideshow dipping as low as 15 FPS and averaging between 20 and 30, turn into a much more manageable situation, winding up around the solid 60 FPS mark, although we did have a couple of issues here and there dipping into like the low 40s, but overall definitely a better experience. Well, I've got to say I'm really pleased with our upgrades. I was able to drop in a new CPU and GPU and really get a little bit more out of this Precision platform than what was there. It was refreshing to pull apart a pre-built machine and just be able to slap in some new upgrades without having to deal with power supply adapters and that sort of thing. And I'm just really happy with the Precision platform in general. So I'll be looking out for these more in the future. I'm sure my friend will be much happier with the gaming performance that he has now, and the results really speak for themselves. Be sure to stay tuned as we have much more content on the way, and in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.